successful lab test is proof that the key to saving Louisiana's bayou might lie in the cypress roots themselves.
We know that all of the flooding and all of that destruction that happened with Hurricane Katrina could have been avoided if that swamp was still in place.
Right.
The cypress trees also are able to sequester carbon. So if that tree is pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and it's burying it in its roots, all of that carbon is coming out of the air and not perpetuating the cycle of climate change.
So the thing that could save the world is these roots, basically.
Yes. Cypress can save the world.
Cypress would save the world.
Long before Aunt Julia ever practiced her hoodoo, before even the American slave trade, the people in West Africa believed the roots held power beyond our understanding. It's taken science hundreds of years to catch up and confirm that, in a way, they were right.
There's a lot that's been said about Aunt Julia's curse. It's said that she cursed the swamp. I don't necessarily agree with that.
Oh, really?
That could have been a prediction to get across to these people, live right, get it together, or all of this could be gone.
The interesting part of it to me is a curse comes from transgression, right? Like you've done something to offend the gods, you've done something wrong. And all the ills that are assailing Louisiana, all the things that are destroying the wetlands, comes from things we've created, come from problems that mankind has made. You know, the land is cursed, absolutely. And it's a curse brought on by the very thing Aunt Julia was railing against. You know, you were destroying her forest, you were destroying her land, and it was all going to get washed away. And that's exactly what happened.
The indigenous people's land, our land.
So the curse of Aunt Julia wasn't a curse at all. Maybe it was the wise words of a woman whose connection to the earth far exceeded any understanding science could offer at the time. The Louisiana Bayou is in trouble, but not because of magic, but because of mankind's short-sightedness and the laws of unintended consequences. The accelerated effects of the hurricanes are because of all of it: logging, canals, the vanishing swampland, climate change, and even the invasive rodent that destroys everything in its path. These are all man-made maladies. We created imbalances in the natural order. And as for the possibility of the shrimpocalypse, I got some good news. Shrimp are delicious. But in the connectedness in our ecosystem, we can find balance. There are hundreds of people who are dedicated to restoring order in the bayou. And maybe the best hope of all is in the roots. The very thing that gave Aunt Julia her power. It could ultimately be the key to ending the curse.
There is no voodoo without the plants. There is no voodoo without... Greetings and salutations, honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Voodoo Hoodoo 101. Powered by, sponsored by, supported by, promoted by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. We continue to invite your participation and your support of New Orleans International Voodoo Day, now in our third year. And we invite you to visit us at our website, www.vodouday.org. Again, visit us at www.voodooday.org, VODOUDAY.org, where we continue to build a historic and powerful event for the descendants of the Middle Passage, as well as those throughout the Pan-African religious and spiritual diaspora, to come together and meet in the historic and legendary Congo Square and acknowledge the ancestors, acknowledge the gods, but also to create healing, bring about balance, if you will, in our society. I want to thank each and every one of our chat room guests for always coming and participating with us. Greetings, D Goddess, Daniel, Neil. Peace and blessings to you and yours. And to Mambo, Sally Ann, we certainly appreciate you as well. Honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. Thank you so much for coming through. And I'm going to introduce my co-host, Elder Reggie, we know as Green Soap on this platform. And then we will open the mic for Toni Val Martinez. Peace and blessings, Elder Reggie. How you doing?
Yeah, greetings, Divine Prince. We in good spirits tonight. Greetings, Sister Toni. How you doing? And we'll build a little bit on. Sister
You
Toni,
broke up. You broke up a little bit there.
I did, Divine Prince.
Yeah, that we didn't hear what the last thing you said.
Oh, I said we'll build a little bit on tonight with Julie Brown if you would like. But and then I was passing the mic over to Sister Toni.
Come on in, Sister Toni Val.
Hey, everybody out there listening. Elder Reggie, Divine Prince. I hope you all are having a good afternoon, well, evening now. A good night. Good vibes and all of that stuff. The story of Julia Brown is very interesting, and we could indulge on that a little more. To me, is when the people seem to turn on her after going to her for so many years when they needed help. They kind of got like a mob mentality, and one person said one bad thing and everybody else just jumped on the bandwagon, knowing all that she had did for them. And just like today, I can bet the very ones she helped the most was the ones in front bad talking her, calling her evil things, But it's a very, very interesting story. And I've been searching for similar stories because I know hers is not the first. Because we have a lot of smaller towns that had disappeared, that had got wiped out by a hurricane. And I have to basically do some more research and find the names of the hurricanes and see what all the damage that they did. And when I find the damage, then I can find out more information. But in the bayous, you can find a lot of wrecks of what was a lot of houses that once stood, houseboats halfway sunken in the water, in the swamp, that people thrived on. I used to love to go to the houseboats and crab and fish down Highway 90, all the way down there. The communities, you cross the street and it was houses on both sides of the street that was no bigger than a road. But on both sides of them, it was water and you had the store and you had the bars. So, but it's a lot of them that's missing. Now, Hurricane Katrina destroyed a lot of them, but a lot were destroyed before then because, they were gone before Katrina hit. And I'm wondering if Hurricane Betsy took out a lot of them also.
And certainly the climate change and destruction to the region has been consistent since the time of Julia Brown up until modern day.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Elder Reggie.
Yeah, what makes Julia Brown peculiar and stands out is the prophecy. It's the words that she said and it came to pass. There may have been other people who said things, but it just didn't get recorded. It just didn't take hold the way Julia Brown did. And that particular story, when you look at it and you see how they treated this lady in that, I call it the German coast of New Orleans, that whole Laplace area, even if you think of the 1811 slave revolt by Charles DeLong, they were just brutal and harsh. and I'm pretty sure they treated Julia Brown that way. And when she gave the prophecy, and then 2 days later, this hurricane came up on them, the people made a connection to the prophecy. That's the
And no
way.
one talks about the 40 acres and a mule. I mean, her husband received the 40 acres and a mule and not long after died. And so there's a whole nother layer to, how she was treated and how she interacted with that community. That is still, as far as I'm concerned, goes untold as it relates to this story. And we have documentation of them. A fact of her after her husband passed away, and then she subsequently inherited his portion. She was the biggest, landowner in that region at the time.
And that had to piss off a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. But years ago when I was studying that, come to find out, the St. Louis, the rotunda.
We lost you.
Oh wow, you lost me again?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
clearly.
I was just saying, in that 1915 hurricane, the rotunda of the St. Louis Hotel, which was slaves were sold at the auction block, was also destroyed within that hurricane, of the same one that's of Julia Brown fame. And I just had looked at the correlation to that building also.
Yes. Yes. That
And
was a serious hurricane.
It was. Yes, it was.
And we've been discussing magic, witchcraft, divination, etc., as it related to the Jamaican experience and the Maroon colonies. We were last discussing the mindset of particularly the British coming into the new Americas as it related to magic. And in England, the official stance on magic, which is to say the opinion of a handful of elite writers that was reflected in legislation, was that it was diabolical and threatening to the state. Conjuration, enchantment, witchcraft, sorcery were all criminalized in England and therefore prosecutable in civil as distinct from church courts for most of the period between 1562 to 1735, beginning with the 1562 statute passed during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. The punishment was flexible according to the severity of the accusation, but it was often brutal. Witchcraft linked to homicide was a first-degree felony punishable by death. Witchcraft aimed at maiming or the damaging of property was a second-degree felony punishable by years imprisonment for a first offense and death for a second offense. To find lost or stolen goods or to provoke unlawful love. The skill set of the typical wise woman or wise man was a third-degree felony, punishable by years imprisonment for a first offense and life imprisonment for a second. Witchcraft, a category that grew to encompass any sort of non-orthodox magic, was recognized as a threat to the monarch. When an accusation of magic did reach the highest courts, the brutality of the punishment assessed as a result of a guilty verdict reflected the fear that the officials held of magic's destructive capacity towards the state as well as the individual who brought the complaint. Another view of magic operated at the popular level, ones that was not necessarily friendly, but which had a greater tolerance for the practice of magic as a form of remedy. Popular is understood in the context to mean the non-literate masses, what the average person who was not concerned with the elite theology and demonology discourse would have even understood about magic. The inadequacies of orthodox medical service, according to Keith Thomas, meant that the population of Tudor and Stuart England still depend on traditional folk magic, which was often in the hands of the enslaved population. Magic was an alternative mode of rationality and one capable of generating solutions that could not be handled within the church. Thomas notes a preoccupation with the explanation and relief of human misfortune. Society was highly stratified, and the contrast between rich and poor was everywhere conspicuous. Over half of England's population was earning less than they consumed, and the landowners and professional class, though only 5% of the population enjoyed a larger proportion of the national income that did over the um, enjoyed a larger proportion of the national income than did all the lower class, over 50%, put together. And this mindset would have been carried into the New World, would have been brought to now the burgeoning U.S. Thomas postulates that a popular magic thrived within this context. If he is correct, then the similar conditions in Jamaica should mean that the planter classes readily carried their beliefs about magic to the Caribbean. Thus, they sought out the same sorts of remedies that were available in Britain for illnesses, theft of property, and all sorts of maladies, thereby creating a market for magical medical services. In the eyes of the popular laity, the local diviner or cunning person back home was not a witch or a heretic. So, from a market perspective, there was no necessary association between New World producers of those desirable sorts of magic and magic of an evil sort. Much like we now hear tossed around white magic, black magic. There's really no such thing, no clear distinction where black magic is applied to remedy something otherwise wicked and abominable. So too can white magic be utilized to perform really dastardly deeds in the hands of someone with the consciousness and the mindset to operate in that way. For Africans, however, practices that Europeans call magical were understood instead as traditional healing and divination. Magic implied a sort of illusion or trickery, which is the dichotomy that Sister Val was explaining last night. Magic as a entertainment and performance element, as opposed to something more medicinal, spiritual. Magic implied a sort of illusion or trickery. Divination was a legitimate form of knowledge seeking, and healing practices did not have to be magical at all. This is important to mention only because, although magic has been used loosely to describe both African and European practices, the term is actually more nuanced. When these practices reach Jamaica, however, British writers tend to subsume them under the title of obia, just like they subsume them under the title of hoodoo or even conjure here in the Deep South. And because temporaries legislation reflected this lumping together, the term magic cannot be totally divorced from African practices. But readers should be made aware that it is not an emic category. As it appears in this document, magic operates as the broadest ethic category that can usefully describe European and African ideas. much like I use voodoo with 4 O's to encompass Aboriginal and indigenous practices among the Pan-African diaspora, both here in the so-called New World, but also voodoo with 4 O's is not so uncommonly used in Ghana or Nigeria today among the otherwise Christianized and Islamicized general population. So Obia typically referring to just the African-derived subset of magical practices in the West Indies. It's more challenging to use because the British and Africans in Jamaica held competing ideas about its meaning because it is used by both groups. However, it should not be neglected. And I did maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago, a documentary for PBS with Dr. Emily Zerka, where we dived into the topic of zombies. And of course, herbal medicine came up in that equation and in that discussion. And I made the statement at that time that I was not seeking to represent Haitian voodoo in the context of my explanations and detailed as it related to the whole zombie phenomenon. And I went into detail about this negative usage of the word obia by the oppressive population, but then a more spiritual, medicinal, natural use of the word obia among our people and at the grassroots level. So, as shall be illustrated, in a society frequently shocked by rebellion, revolution, uprising, obia quickly became a tool for exercising political power. The obia practitioner was always a generalist, so the potential to apply one's healing or divination to the purposes of war probably carried over in part from Africa. However, the place of obia in rebellion quickly developed in Jamaica owing to the near constant state of rebellion and the model of successful rebellion established by the Jamaican Maroons by 1740. It was this obia that the British came to fear the most by the early 19th century. And this would have been, what, 30 years before the Haitian Revolution?
Yeah.
What year was that, Reggie? 1780?
Yeah, more like 40 plus years because Haitian Revolution starts in 1791. That's 1740. So almost 40 plus years before. Yes.
So this fear of us operating in the spirit realm would have been universal. And it would have been documented differently based on certainly the environments in which the topic is being discussed, as in this case, by the good white folks going through the archives of Jamaica. So it was this practice, this knowledge, this awareness that the overseers came to fear, and we still operate under that, that pretense and that fear to this day. The continued demonization of spirit practices after now decades, 50 years or more of knowing better, being re-educated about what African spirituality is, Caribbean, Aboriginal spirituality is, and the need to still separate it and divide it. One is stronger than the other. One is more authentic than the other. One is more, black than the other. When we were all fighting the same demons, fighting the same oppressive system, and we're often using many of the same formulas at the grassroots level. And for obia practitioners, little has fundamentally changed about the nature and form of the power and usage of the power, even to modern times. Both African and British observers, however, obia, which is to say the combination of divination with other practices subsumed under the label of obia, was increasingly a political act. And by tracing 3 particular instances of rebellion that featured Obia, this document, as I explained last night, looks at the Tacky rebellion, the movements and activities of Queen Nanny of the Maroons, who was said to have utilized divination in their practice and in their activities as Maroons. And certainly St. Milo, who we acknowledge on Juneteenth here locally, and the usage of these skills and abilities, though not quite as well documented as far as we know of in the good Catholic archives. We certainly know the footprint and the fear to be palatable here in Louisiana. What say you, Sister Toni?
The fear of us and went all the way back to their fatherland. All those crimes and punishments, death for doing this and a year sentence for doing that, all of that came down through the kings and queens, but it was written and put in there by the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church already knew that magical book had a lot of magic in there, but they never decided to take Moses out for being a witch. And then that book says, and the reason so many people are afraid of it, of the Bible, because the Bible has so much to say against witchcraft. Suffer a witch to die, stone a witch, all of this stuff like that. But it wasn't like that in every Caucasian environment. Just the ones that was attached to Catholicism. Because the Romanovs had Rasputin, and he was a hell of a witch, and he followed them everywhere they went, and everybody knew what he was doing. So it wasn't, and I think they were more Puritan religion, but the Catholic religion really came down on that, but they was hypocrites. Because all the time when they was rewriting the Bible, they didn't write it out. The things that they call miracles and all of this. When Moses told them, put the lamb's blood outside their door and death was going to pass over them, what you think that was? Voodoo. He used blood for protection. And everybody, for the firstborn, when all the firstborn was going to die, how could death pass over my house? Put the blood outside on your door. And even those that didn't get that message, their firstborns died. That was still with the Hebrews. Because
And
they
what was
didn't
the
have...
breastplate?
Huh?
I said, and what was the breastplate? What was that magic all about? Turning the rod into serpents. What was that magic all about? The prophecies of the witch of Endor in the Old Testament. What was that voodoo about?
Yes. They didn't take all of that out, but they want... They great prophets are witches. Your book is full, even though they took out the books of Moses, what, the 6 and 7 books of Moses, 5th and 6th books, whatever it was. They still have so much through it that they couldn't take it all out. They was hypocrites. There was a bunch of scary hypocrites. And to the Catholic Church, first, it was a way of controlling and scaring women, I think, at first. Because they didn't see men too much as doing witchcraft. That came on later when they had the frenzy about everybody a witch. The dog is a witch. And all of that stuff coming about. But the Catholic Church is a reason for a lot of that. And a lot of people suffered because of the Catholic Church. But we took and turned it around and started using it against them when it got to New Orleans. We used their own saints and icons in our favor.
That's right.
So we turned it on them.
Yeah, you got to look at it. You got to look at it for what it is. And what it is from the perspective I see it is, if you're going to move energy from one dimension to another dimension, let's say this third dimension, to manifest something that may look like magic, you have to have a correlation to the spirit behind the manifestation. And the Catholic Church, the British, the Portuguese, they did not understand the relationship that the African people had with nature, with other world beings, which we call spirits. They just did not understand that. And so they had to find a label, witchcraft, witch doctor, to put on their head to say that's evil, what we're doing is good. And that's where all this stuff is starting from. Because what the Africans was doing, they couldn't explain to you what they was doing. They just do it because it had been part of tradition. This is all they knew. So they didn't really put it in a category.
It was a way of life.
Yes.
It was everyday life. And when you think about it, similar cultures that had similar traditions of working with the earth, they also destroyed them. The Irish, the Vikings, the Gypsies, anybody that did any kind of what we would call root work, they set out to destroy them.
That's right.
Because they were afraid of them. They were afraid of them. They knew the power. They just didn't want us to know the power. They knew what could be done. They had witnessed it. What you think the first European did back in 17 whatever, when he saw that straw house spinning around with nobody in there?
Yeah.
They went back with tales of Medusa. She had snakes in her head. No, she had dreadlocks.
Okay.
But since y'all got whipped, y'all had to come up with this fantabulous story and not tell them that these women whipped y'all in battle. Because remember, Medusa wasn't the only one that had snakes. All them women had snakes, the Gorgons.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So they make up these fantabulous tales when they losing, when they seen the fierceness. They just didn't want us to get it because then we would roll with it.
That's right.
Well, it's coming to a close of our session. And I look forward to seeing everyone here tomorrow night at the same time. I'm going to turn it over to Elder Reggie to close out with information on International Voodoo Day, keeping y'all informed. Elder Reggie?
Yes, thank you, Sister Toni. Once again, we appreciate everyone coming out. We appreciate Divine Prince for holding such a powerful show. And all the elements and energy you bring, Sister Toni, we're appreciative of that. And of course, we love the chat. The chat is always interesting. I like reading it. And I like some of the people in the chat to try to come out and support some of the events that we're doing in the New Orleans area. I like to say the National New Orleans Voodoo Day, we're working toward our third anniversary event. Tentative dates are out there, and I believe they're going to be locked in. And so as that do get locked in, we'll bring forth more information. But here in the near future, there's going to be a marker that the International New Orleans Voodoo Day will be mounting on Esplanade and Dauphine. Once that is cleared up, we'll put out the information and invite those in the local area or those who are in driving distance to come down and support this event. It's very powerful for the information that it is dealing with, but also it's keeping in line what we're doing as a voodoo community in the city of New Orleans. With that, I say thanks again for your presence. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Odabo.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I have to say something because this whole I work with understanding is getting way out of hand. My love, we're human. We're human. Deities and divinities. Humans. Deities and divinities. We are not equal to these deities and divinities, none whatsoever. As humans, are we divine in our own right and own nature and everything? Because Creator lives within all things, including us. Does divinity flow through us? Of course. But we're human. Deities and divinities. They're not your homeboys or your homegirls where you could call upon them at any time you want, have them do things, and then after that, you put down the phone. No. That's not how it works. None whatsoever. And some of these deities and divinities requires initiation to be able to know how to worship and service them properly so you can work with them properly. And that knowledge is only passed down to you from elders within the practice. And I'm going to be talking to Risha here because you only learn how to properly work with Orisha and how to properly worship and service Orisha from elders in the practice. Only through initiation you gain that knowledge and understanding. You can't just pick up a candle, kick it on, and then just think that you're going to be connecting and reaching out to Oshun or Yemaya or whoever. It doesn't work that way. There are secrets and understandings that are passed down when it comes to Orisha that requires initiation. Orisha will not ever come to you in a dream or anything like that or blah, blah, blah to give you these secrets on how to properly be able to service them, work with them, worship them. They won't. You only gain that from the elders. And in the words of my godfather, because him and I had a conversation about a month ago and everything, Orisha does not need us. It's us humans that need Orisha. And you only gain that understanding, once again, through Orisha. It's not some new age spirituality. It's not something that you could just one day wake up the next day and say, I'm a devotee of. Ceremonies, protocol. It's a tradition. Y'all really need to learn how to respect tradition. It is a travesty. It's abysmal how tradition is not respected much these days en masse, especially by people who think that they are exempt from tradition. All right, I have to say something because this whole I work with understanding is getting
Allow me to show you something.
They say I'm crazy and that might be true. I got this white in my DNA, yet I'm coming for you. It's time we turn the tables, flip these motherfuckers on you. I wanna see you hanging from trees. It's time you pay for your dirt and your showtime. You created the monster, you created the beast. Now all this savagery you just gon' reap. I'm coming home, daddy, to the plantation, and I'm taking the lives of everybody, including the children, on some Nat Turner. Oh, do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. I met my girl Harriet at the gate. If you wanna know how she doing, yeah, she's straight. But she had one question: when we gon' get up? All that talking tough, yeah, we don't walk it tough. She got it locked and loaded, got that piece up on her side. She looked me in my eyes and said, "Meet you ready to ride?" Moving forward, you gotta use both eyes. Watch your front and watch your back. Keep your hands up on your gas. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. He sit at the table, but he don't order no bacon. He greet me in those words, assalamu alaikum. Got them glasses on his face and them waves in his head. He go by the name of Detroit Red. He looks me in my eye and says, "You only get one try. Know that your biggest opposition will come from the inside." I know you wanna love them all, but don't even try, because they'll smile up in your face while plotting your demise. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. We are the children of the ancestors that weren't punk bitches.